Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to answer a very fundamental question about woodworking, and that is simply, how do we figure out how much your project costs? So we're going to discuss how to calculate board feet. So we're going to start at the basics and then move on to a little more intricate questions and problems as we go, and this will lead directly into your assessment later on. So first thing is, we need to identify what are we talking about when we say board feet. Well, let's start even more basic than that. Everyone should know what square feet is. SF, square feet. How do you get square feet of something? It's simply length times width. We've all done it in school when we were younger. Square feet is length times width. So a simple question. A lot of my plywood, very standard size, is going to be 4 feet by 8 feet. So when we do projects out of plywood, that's the big sheet that we pull out and we cut it down to size. So if we're figuring out square feet for this one sheet of plywood, how do we do it? It's simply 4 times 8, length times width. 4 times 8 is 32 square feet. And there's our answer. Great. Now there are times, and most of the time, the dimensions that you get will be in inches, okay, not in feet. So let's go ahead and erase some of these. 4 feet is 48 inches, 8 feet is 96. Now there's a couple of ways we could do this. Either you could write it as 48 over 12. Remember, how do we convert inches into feet? We just divide by 12. 48 over 12 times 96 over 12, and that would give me an answer, and that would be correct. You could chug it out on your calculator, no problem. If we combined everything together, we could say 48 times 96, divide all of it by 144. 144 is simply 12 times 12, and there's my 144, and it still works. The math is still the same. And once you take your calculator, and I'll be referring to this often, 48 times 96 equals 4,608. What? What is that? Well, 4,608 inches. That's how many inches are in this sheet. And we're dividing it by 144 because that's how many inches is in a square foot. It's the same, we're doing the same thing as dividing by 12. We're just, as I said before, we're just combining them. You end up with 32. Same answer, okay? The next thing we're going to cover is, what if there are multiple sheets? So let's say I have, 12 sheets. You go through a lot more than that in a day. 12 sheets of plywood, okay, the math. Where do I put this 12? Well, my original answer with not changing these dimensions was 32, and all you simply have to do is throw in a times 12 sheets. 32 times 12 is 384. So now I have 384 square feet out of 12 sheets. Now, how does that relate to our original equation? So we have length times width. We can just throw in here times the number of pieces. Okay, times the number of pieces. So now we've got 3 numbers up there that we need to figure out as we go through problems. Now I've redrawn it into another problem that we need to figure out. Now instead of a sheet of plywood, now we've got this thick, big cube of wood. Okay, so all the dimensions are there. We have 12 inches wide, 12 inches deep, and 4 inches thick. So again, we're looking for a couple of numbers, and I'm not doing more than, I'll just say 1 piece. Okay, 1 piece, 1 block of wood. So we're not going to worry about that this time. Now, we have an extra number here. We have a thickness, and we'll get to that in just a second. But first, let's plug in what we do have and what we do know already. So I'll step over here a little bit. We have our square feet is length, so it's 12, because they're all 12, except for the height. Our width is 12, and then how many do we have? 1 of them. Now, but we also have this thickness. Now, let me explain how to convert all this now into board feet, not into square feet. Every when we put in a thickness, we'll say times our thickness or height, length times width times height, but thickness would be exactly the same thing. We are actually telling it how many layers we've got that are an inch. A board foot is defined as a 12 by 12 by 1 inch thick piece of wood. Okay, that is one board foot. Now most of my wood doesn't come 12 inches wide, and we know that, and we'll deal with that later, but for now, this is a 12 by 12 block, just so we can get through and understand. So my thickness is telling me how many 1 inch thick pieces are in it. They're not actual pieces, but I'm saying there's 4 1 inch 12 by 12 slabs, okay? So if we take that number and just put it in here times 4 at the end, we're doing our thickness there. Now I've got 4 numbers that I'm dealing with, and we're going to divide all that by, what did we divide the last one with? 144, because that is how many inches are in a 12 by 12 square. So we divide by that same number every single time. Now we take our calculator, and when you plug in all the numbers, 12 times 12 is 144 times 4, 576 inches. So we're not looking for inches, we're looking for feet, divided by 144. That will give me exactly 4 board feet. I'll just say BF for now, which makes sense because if I have a 12 by 12 and 1 inch thick, that is 1 board foot, and I'm saying just here in the drawing I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. That is exactly what I got with the math. So now, instead of calling this square feet, with all 3 numbers, length, width, and thickness, it would be cubic feet. Or, because we're a woodshop class, this is woodworking, and we want to do woodworking type of things, we call it board feet, like I mentioned before. So now everything is calculated as board feet, and when you go to a store to buy lumber, they will sell it to you by the board foot. They would have done these calculations for you already. You just say, I need 200 board feet, 300 board feet. They will get out that much volume of wood, and you can purchase it and take it home to use. Now we've redrawn it to another problem, making it a little bit more intense, but not bad. All we're looking for now, I've redrawn our calculation. It's bigger, it's more bold up at the top. This is the calculation for board feet, and we divide all of it by our 144. That is the formula to calculate board feet. So when I was in high school, my math teacher would call these plug and chug equations, because all we do is we find the right number that fills in the equation, plug it in, chug out the answer, and that's how we're going to do it. So here is our next one. We have 6 boards that are this same size. So let's plug in the numbers. We want board feet. What is my thickness? Thickness is 2.5. And if you want to write it as decimal, 2.5, if that's easier because it's easier on the calculator, that's fine. So we have thickness. What is my width? My width is going to be from front to back. That's 10 times 10. My length is generally my longest number, but this is my remaining 32 1/4. 0.25. And as a side note, if any of you have trouble with decimals converting, I generally don't use fractions that are other than halves and fourths when I'm doing this on tests. Just think of it as quarters in a dollar. There are 4 quarters in a dollar. 1 quarter is 25 cents, 2 quarters 50 cents, 75 cents, and a dollar, right? So 1 quarter, 1/4 is 1 quarter, that is 0.25, 25 cents. 1/2 would be half a dollar, 50 cents. 3 quarters is 75 cents, that's 0.75. That's an easy way to do quarters. Now, I've got my 3 numbers, my measurements. My last one is how many pieces. Put in times 6, right there. And we divide it by 144. Now, as also a side note, if you don't remember which is thickness, which is width, and which is length, it does not matter what order you put them in. Any order, as long as they're all being multiplied together, will give you the same answer. Take your calculator, chug out the number. When I finished Multiplying out the top row, I got 4,837.5 inches, and now divide by 144, and you end up with 33.59. So they don't always come into an exact number, and that's okay. We're just going to cut it off at 2 decimal places. So I got 5 or 6 decimals, just cut it off at 2, and that's what I'm looking for. So our board feet is equal to 33.59, feet, board feet. That's fine. That's what we're looking for, our increments. And that question is done. Now we have our next problem, a little more intricate again. We keep moving it up a little bit. Please forgive my skewed drawing as we're going. This is a simple web frame or a dust frame or whatever you want to call it. We make them a lot in our projects to hold the carcass together. So this is a simple web frame that's a little extra thick. It's 1.5 thick, and this right here is telling me that the board that goes in between these two is 6 inches because it's hollow. There's nothing in between. I can put my hand through it. Okay, so I can't in my equation just put in 20 by whatever it is that way because that would make me pay too much because I'm saying that this is solid. So now I have to break it up into 2 different equations, and I'll explain that as we go. So each board, because I've only designated that one of them is 3 inches wide, from that we can assume that all of them are the same width because I didn't say otherwise. So you don't have to wonder how wide is this one if that one's 3 and so forth. They're all 3. Okay, so this board is 6, that board's 20 and so forth. Now here's how it works with multiple pieces. Each piece that is the same size I can put into one equation. I have 2 pieces. So I'm going to need 2 equations, the same equation, but 2 of them to get all of these pieces. I need one for the small pieces, one for the larger pieces. So let's come over to the side. Let's say large piece, LP, however you want to designate it. Let's get our 4 numbers and put them in. Thickness is the same, 1.5. They're all that same thickness, so 1.5 times width, 3. They're all 3 wide. Times length. Long pieces, these are 20, because these are the ones I want. So I've got that figured out there. Times 20 inches. And then how many pieces are there? There's 2. And divide that by 144. Very good. The short pieces, SP, a lot of the numbers are going to be the same with one difference. Thickness is 1.5, that's over at the far end, 1.5. My width is 3 again, they're all 3. Well, my length, that's the difference. It's not 20 anymore, it's only 6. So this board only goes from that line to that line, and I told you it's 6. And then how many are there? There are 2. And divide all that by 144. So go ahead and chug that out on your calculator. For the first one, I got 1.25. So I'll circle that. It's getting a little crowded. Now here's just something that you can check yourself on. It helps you get the right answer later on. If my larger pieces give me 1.25, will my smaller pieces, should the number be bigger or should it be smaller than my original, than my first one? Well, simply because the pieces are smaller, it should be much smaller, maybe even half, if not a little bit less. So as I get my second one, I can compare to my first one and know if it makes sense. So go through your calculator and get the second one. So I figured it out on my calculator at 0.38. I actually got 375, but I'm rounding. So use the same rules of rounding that you normally do. So now I've got 2 answers here, 1.25 and 0.38. What do I do with those numbers to get a total? Simply add them together. I'll just put a line down here and hit plus, and there's my 2 numbers. 1.25 plus 0.38 equals 1.63 board feet, because that's what I'm after. Now that I have this number, I've underlined it a few times, the question should be in your mind, you told us, Mr. Ellefson, that we're going to figure out how much money it's worth. How do we figure out what it's worth? We know how much wood we have, that's a volume of wood, how much is it going to be worth? So if I come over here and say this is made of oak, and oak, let's say, is $2.50 per foot, per board foot. Remember, this is how we purchase it from the lumber company. They sell it to us per board foot, so I know ahead of time what it's worth. This number, what it's made of and what it's worth per foot, will always be given to you. So that is not something you'll have to figure out. So if it's oak, it's $2 a foot, and I have this many feet of wood, what do you do with the numbers? You multiply them together. Just hit times. This number should still be in my calculator. Just hit the times button, 2.5, $2.50, and you will get another number. And I got $4.08. And that is my final value or worth of this particular project, $4.08 for that frame. Think of it this way. You do this exact thing, this ending that we just did, every time you walk into a store. You're trying to answer two questions. How many do I want, and what are they worth each? That's how many I have, and that's what they're worth each. It is this times this. If I want 10 of them times $2 each, multiply them together, it's 20 bucks. You do this without even thinking about it. This is no different. I'm figuring out how many units I want, and I will give you what it's worth per unit. In this case, board feet. For this particular problem, it's similar to the last one we did. It's another box, but it's much taller. But it has 4 different sides. Now, it's bottomless. It doesn't have a bottom. I'm not going to worry about it for this particular question. So we're just dealing with the 4 sides. They're 2 inches thick, and that's all of them. They're all 2 inches thick. 16 inches deep, 8 inches tall, 24 wide. And now let's figure it out. This is also made of oak, and I said before it was $2.50 per foot or per board foot. So now we have all the information that we need. We need to figure out how much this box is going to cost. Let's go over to the side of the board and start plugging in everything into our equation so we can chug out an answer for how much it's worth. So to start, we'll do our left and right pieces, and then we'll do our front and back after that. So I'm doing the sides first. We'll just put an equal sign here. Thickness of the left and right, 2 inches. Width. In this case, again, the numbers don't matter, but I would say 8 would be my width. Length, 16 front to back. How many are there? Left and right, there's 2. And divide that by 144. And those are the sides. This is the front and back, F and B. Doing the same thing, and a lot of numbers again will be the same. Thickness is 2, they're all 2. My width would be 8. And my length, now your immediate reaction is going to be it's 24, and you'll want to put in a 24. And then how many are there front and back? There's 2. Let's go back to that 24. This is incorrect. But why? It says 24 right there. I can see it, but it's still wrong. Here's the reason. 24 inches is from the edge to the edge. Yes, but each of these boards is 2 inches thick here and here. I need to know what it is from here to there. Okay, whatever that dimension is there to there. That's the number I'm looking for. So this is one of those, I'll throw a little curveball at you to see if you can figure it out. Because if I leave that at 24, I'm going to be spending too much money. It's more than it'll actually be worth. So we need to subtract 24 inches minus 2 inches and minus 2 more would be not 24, it'll now be 20 inches. Now it's correct. So make sure as you're looking at your design that you're not missing out on thicknesses somewhere, something that needs to be subtracted so you get the right answer. And we divide that by 144. Go ahead and use your calculator and get an answer. For the top, I got 3.56. So I got my answer, but again, take a quick glance at your drawing. I did my sides here, and they're a little bit smaller than these. So I got 3.56. You would expect this one to be a little bit bigger than the original. And sure enough, I got 4.44 repeating. So now that we have each side, the board feet for each of the sides, now we'll simply just add them up. It's this number plus that number. And go through and figure it out. 8 exactly. I happen to get lucky with the right measurements on this one. So now we have 8 board feet. Now remember, this isn't money. It's a common mistake is people get to this point and say 8. Great, $8, done. And that's not the case. So we have 8 board feet. We'll just put 8.0. And we need to figure out the price of the whole thing. So we need to know unit price. How much is it per foot? It's written right here, 2.5. That one number that we haven't used, just times 2.5 and figure that out. The answer is $20. So it's going to be $20 for this hollow box. Let's take a look at our final picture example. So here we have a simple coffee table, and it's super easy. I mean, we have a lid and 4 legs attached to the top. Not exactly the most structurally sound project, but for our example, it'll work fine. And remember, we need one equation per piece that is a different size. So we need one for the top, and we only need one for all 4 legs, assuming they're all the same size. And unless I marked it otherwise, that's a safe assumption. So let's go through it. We know it's made of alder. It's $1.10 per foot. We do that at the end. So we need equation for the top. So we have our top. Thickness is 1, way over at the far right, 1 inch thick. Width, 36. Length, 60. And then how many are there? 1. Now obviously guys, any equation you have a 1 in, you could leave it out because anything times 1 is itself. So it's just 36 times 60. However you decide to do it is fine. I'm putting these numbers in simply to show you where they go, where they come from and where you plug them in. Divide all that by 144 and you'll get a number. Now we do the legs. Thickness. Now these numbers right here are where you're going to get that. We have a 2.5 by a 2.5 square for the legs. So they're a little bit more beefy. They're a little thicker both ways. So we have 1 number, 2 numbers, 3 numbers. That's all we're looking for. So for thickness, we put 2.5. For width, it's the other 2.5. And my length is my 20. So from the underside of that to the leg, the bottom of the floor is 20. And there are 4 legs. Make sure, don't forget the 4. And divide all that by 144. So, chug out the numbers, and I'll write it down when I get it. The first one, 14.90. The second one, 3.45. So there's one number, there's my second number. Now I wanted to mention this before we add them together. If, this is if, the top was made of one kind of wood and the legs were made from a different kind of wood, then I would take the top number, whatever it's made of, multiply it by its price, get a number. I would then take what the bottom wood is worth for the legs, that other number, multiply this one by that other number, multiply it out, and I'd get a value. And then just add that up. So that order can change depending on what you're dealing with. In this case, because they're both the same, we'll just add now and multiply it out later. But remember, projects many times will have multiple kinds of wood. Make sure to keep track of that. So now add these together. 18.35 board feet. Still not at wood yet, so board feet. 18.35, and now times that by the price per foot, which is $1.10. We end up with our answer for the full value. $20.19 for this table. Hopefully this helps piece together in your mind the order of operation and where to get the numbers from, because that's the hardest part of all of it. Where do you get the numbers? Where do you plug them in the equation? If you can figure that out, your length, width, thickness, and pieces, the rest of this is straight algebraic on your calculator problems and easy to do. So best of luck on the questions on your test.